Full disclosure, the voice you are listening to now is artificially generated, brought to you by satisphonic.com. See the link in the description for more details. Employers of Reddit, what can someone put on a resume that sends it straight to the shredder? Attention to detail, quick learner, Microsoft Office, QuickBooks, Sage 50 payroll attention to detail. Make sure you attach the right file. I once had somebody attach his court summons for a Dewey charge. Instant deny. I once received a resume in the mail that had no telephone number, address or email. He called a few days later to ask why he hadn't received any reply. I asked him to get a copy of his resume so we could review it together. I asked him to tell me the address we might have replied to, then the telephone number, and finally the email. After a long pause, he said, "Oh, fuck," and hung up. I used to manage a restaurant and also remember getting a resume without phone number or email. Funny stuff. Shit, someone who can understand they made a mistake and own it. Hired. I once submitted approximately 75 resumes without my phone number. I did include my parents' fax number. It was a prompt in the Mrs. Word template, so why not? And eventually someone faxed me an interview offer. I'm not even that old. I could have put an email address on the resume and just didn't. One resume I got while managing a head shop included how much he could bench and the characters he played in high school theater. He was in his late mid-20s. Sounds like Andy Bernard. Okay, I was a writing tutor at the college level for 10 years. We also helped graduates of the university. I swear I am not making this up. A graduate who had worked teaching English in Japan and at other positions for a few years after getting his degree came in for help updating his resume. He reported that he'd been looking for work for a while with no luck. The profile section at the head of his resume listed accomplishments, including, "I have climbed Mount Fuji, fueled only by quaaludes and caffeine." He was crestfallen when I told him that although I was duly impressed by this feat, he really needed to remove it. Edit, because of course. How do you climb Mt. Fuji? Go upper, then go downer. How can you be fueled by quaaludes? That's a sedative. If you resist the urge to sleep for just 15 minutes, you get a pretty kick-ass high from it. Well, guy made it through the resume, but almost didn't make it through the onboarding paperwork. Entry-level position. Guy was 19, I think. Nice enough kid. Low life experience. But that's how it all starts, right? Emergency contact info name. Mom relationship. Good. So like if we called your mom and you were hurt, she'd care? That's fucking hilarious. Thank you. My daughter got a birth control implant a year or so ago, and my sister took her to get it. She said she read back over the paperwork, and where my daughter was supposed to sign her name, that she gave her consent to the procedure, my daughter had simply written yes. She is her father's child. Technically, here's no rule you need to sign with your name. Your signature could be your best dick drawing. It used to be traditional for illiterate people to sign with a big X. I used to work as a teller, and there was one business account where the owner signed checks with a smiley face. It was on the signature card and everything. I used to be a bank teller, and this guy signed an extremely consistent squiggly line. Then one day he came in with a beautiful signature, and I told him he needed to stick with his usual one, or he could have issues cashing checks, because it didn't match his check history. He got denied for cashing a 40 check the next week when I went on vacation. I warned him. I saw a guy interviewed once. He said he had signed his name on his driver's license as 3 smiling cat faces. A short time later, he had to sign a stack of real estate docs, and the lender insisted he use his legal signature as shown on his official ID card. He said it took him a very long time to sign his name like that, dozens of times. I coached a kid once put emergency contact relationship as single. I'm tempted to put something similar on our system and see what happens. Emergency contact, the wife relationship. Good, but has it ups and downs. Facebook was way ahead of the game. It's complicated. Please tell me under sex. He put yes, please. Nudes. Like, any picture of yourself is probably going to get the resume thrown out because of potential lawsuits. But hearing that shriek of dear God, why from the hotel manager's desk while they were going through resumes was hilarious. Like, bro, your butt was not that nice. Why did you attach it? I had one where under education he wrote "suck my dick" and get me a job. I stared at the screen for a good 3 minutes when I read that. And does he still like working for your company? Way the company is going, I'm sure he would have. This sounds like the kind of thing where someone edited his resume as a joke and he sent it off without realizing it had been tampered with. Or is court ordered to actively seek employment, but doesn't really want a job? My thoughts exactly. We used to get a lot of these when I worked at a roofing company. My absolute favorite was the guy that rearranged our lobby furniture so that he could plug in his phone charger and kick back while he filled out the application. Boy, that's just a straight shooter with upper management written all over him. I received a resume last week that had notes on it. Insert relevant skills here and maybe change font, fill this space with buzzwords. This was on his LinkedIn profile as well. If you can't pay attention to the resume you sent out, I can't trust you'll pay attention to anything else. Lorem ipsum. My company's website currently says this in one place, and I have brought it to the attention of our IT person multiple times. Yet there it is, taunting me with its lack of professionalism. I once contacted a small business to point out a punctuation error on their site. They had used an apostrophe to make Saturday plural. I explained that apostrophes shouldn't be used that way. They replied to thank me for the feedback. 1 week later, I visited the site again. Every plural word had an apostrophe. Ong! I would lose my mind. We have a local pizza restaurant that sends out texts every Wednesday about large special Wednesdays, and it makes my eye twitch every time. Had a dude turn in his application with black marker lines, redacting all of his info. Only things left were his name, a phone number, and a note saying we can discuss these details during my interview. He, in fact, did not get an interview. Was his name Rusty Shackelford? The only resume I have thrown right in the proverbial shredder was that of the wife of a friend of mine. I was attempting to get her a job at my employer. She had no degree or relevant experience, but we needed a receptionist, and people commonly move up from those jobs into other admin positions. Plus, it's government work, so good benefits, lots of paid holidays, etc. Bottom line, I was doing this underqualified, unemployed person a massive favor by giving her a reference and a chance. We didn't have any other applicants. The job was hers to lose. She didn't know that, so she brought her a game. Here are some excerpts from her cover letter. I may not have a degree, but I have what engineers don't have, 10 years of experience. Engineers aren't very organized people, and I can keep them in line. I have better social skills than engineers do. I am not paraphrasing. Those are things she wrote when she sent me her resume and cover letter to look over before she submitted them online to apply. I was just like, you know I'm an engineer, right? She did. I continued, you know the job you'd be applying for is a receptionist position, not an engineer position, right? She seemed pretty sure she could move up and be an engineer in a year or so. That is not at all a thing in my field. It's one of those fields where everyone is required to be licensed, and you have to have a degree in this just to be allowed to take the exam to get the license, but she was absolutely sure it was. I told her that if she was going to submit this, she wouldn't be hired because the entire panel was engineers. She didn't listen and submitted it. She even listed me as a reference. I told my boss she was someone I was trying to help, and she wouldn't help herself, which was accurate, but I've got what engineers don't have, 10 years of experience. Became the office joke for years to come. Every time someone reached the 10-year mark of their career, we'd be like, you can't be an engineer anymore. The crazy lady said 10 years is the limit. Low. Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers, so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people? I mean, if she had phrased it that way, the engineers might have gone for it. You'll do whatever it takes to protect us from the horrible customers. Hired. I played a similar role at my job in a hospital department. The prosthetic orthotic lab staff preferred not to deal with random DME sales reps dropping by and appreciated my competent gatekeeping. While I wasn't particularly good at dealing with people, most of my colleagues could have learned people skills from Boo Radley. People skills really depends on what you're aiming for. I worked briefly at an electronics store, similar to Best Buy, and while the usual managers and supervisors could rattle off all the product knowledge and promotional material we could possibly provide, there was one supervisor who provided a unique service. Meet Taylor. Taylor, don't give two shits. She was the supervisor that the others called when a customer was getting overly familiar and needed somebody to just straight up tell them no with a withering expression that can only be summoned by somebody with truly no smile in their heart. As somebody with over 10 years customer service experience, it was awe-inspiring. Ha ha, my charge nurse Betty was our tailor. God, I love that woman to pieces. I hope she's doing well. Just thinking about the withering look she'd give to the daughters from California puts a smile on my face. Thank you, Betty, for always being a cunt when we needed it most, and for having zero time for anyone's bullshit. My manager asked me about a guy, and it took me a second to think about it, but I was like, yeah, I do know him. He applied to be in a role on my team unbeknownst to me, and used me as a reference unbeknownst to me. I asked to see his resume. I started reading the resume, the spelling mistakes, the bad grammar. I started feeling so damn embarrassed. Went back to my boss, handed him the resume and said nobody in their right mind would hire someone with a resume like this, and furthermore, he didn't tell me he was using me as a reference. I'm an engineer with 9.5 years experience. It's almost over. Get ready for all that receptionist money. You've earned it. Did this lady think she was applying for a receptionist job? Or did she think she was applying for a Dilbert comic? Military spouse, with rank no less. Like, they put the rank of their military husband or wife, but they themselves were not in the military? Oh yeah, that's a thing they do. I live in a military town and work for the government, but in an entirely non-military agency and capacity. I have definitely had military wives try to pull rank on me at places like the grocery store or in line at the pizza spot, picking my order up. Does this ever work for them? Does it not embarrass their spouse? It embarrasses everyone. Luckily, it's not a frequent occurrence, but I've seen it and been the subject of it a handful of times. I try to not go to the store in uniform, but sometimes the kid needs milk or a prescription picked up, or takeout or whatever. I can tell you it embarrasses the fuck out of other spouses. The second-hand embarrassment from people like that generally keeps me from telling people I'm a spouse. So, I'm an army wife, and a naval officer. The only thing that was more shocking than the number of times it happened was the sheer joy I took in informing them I outranked their husband, because one, stop making your spouses look crazy, and two, don't make me big dick your husband, because I will. It's typically either really humiliating for the milspouse, majority of cases, or the milespouse is a complete moron who encourages it. On the most junior enlisted, yes, and yes. Yep. When I was an E1, if someone said they were a captain's wife, I'd have listened to anything they said. You're just scared of rank at that point. Later, in enlistment, you learn to professionally call bullshit, and no hubby does not agree with wife. Saw one that listed her experience as domestic engineer, aka housewife to military husband. This guy put a Tinder bio at the head of his resume. All his likes and dislikes, with a headshot of him holding an axe while looking sweaty. I do it work. At least if a computer or server ever needs to be felled like a tree, you know who to call. Real professionals have a shotgun next to the bed in case the microwave ever starts talking. I see where the misunderstanding was. The job posting was for it, and this guy thought he was qualified because he has that indescribable it factor. I knew a general's wife. Very nice woman, close to my mother's age. When people started trying to pull their husband's rank at church, to steal her seat, she usually just quietly moved and had someone ask the husband about it, by name in the next formation. I used to work for a bar. A girl came in with an application saying she was 22, but then listed she'd graduated high school that year. I fired off a few questions, then slipped in "What's your birthday?" She was barely 17. His mother handed it to me with him just quietly standing beside her, looking like this wasn't his idea. I didn't make it past the name line on someone's resume one time. We were hiring a CFO, and Googling their name revealed a SEC complaint for a 9-figure fraud. At the time, there wasn't a verdict on the books, but I wasn't gonna wait for one. See, you never... In a prior role, I was hiring for a weekend night shift sanitation position, and we tended to get really desperate people who applied. I reviewed the applicants with a co-worker, and she remembered seeing the name in the local paper recently. I Googled the name and found the court records that the person had not only embezzled, but also, when caught, tried to burn down the prior employer's office to the ground. When my A-team asked why I wasn't interviewing that person, they told me I had to interview them because it was illegal to base that decision on a pending, not final, legal case. It really sounds great to allow that person to work with highly concentrated chemicals in a food manufacturing plant. A couple we didn't shred, but definitely did not call and saved for future laughs. can cook anything related to a potato, followed by the longest list of potato dishes I have ever seen, and this job did not involve food in any form. In special membership section, have a Blockbuster card. I was hiring for a lab technician job, and this guy came highly recommended by someone in purchasing, I think it was. So he got a shot at the interview. His resume wasn't terrible, but there were gaps. He listed his high school graduation date, and then his A degree from the local CE was a good 10 years later. I mean, that's okay, but there was no work experience listed for that time period either. So, then came the interview with my lead technician and me. Walk the guy into a small meeting room and sit down. Before I can even introduce us, he pulls this laminated piece of paper out of his folio, slams it down on the table and pushes it across the table and says, "So when do I start?" The document was a letter of recommendation from his CE physics teacher, a glowing assessment of the candidate which greatly conflicted with my assessment based on his behavior. He did not get the job. Laminated? Yeah, he laminated the recommendation letter. To be fair, this was back in the olden times when you still printed out your resume and cover letter on nice paper and put it in a matching envelope so you could snail mail it to potential employers. When I was in high school, I worked in a shoe store at the mall. We got a resume once for a sales job that had, under the other interest section, special relationship with the one they call Satan. Yes, really. I wanted to interview her, just to see what she'd actually say in person. My manager vetoed that sadly. I have a friend that managed a shoe store. She received an application that said, "I play ukulele," sort of under the skills section. I think about it on a regular basis, and it was probably 10 years ago. Edit. This was the only thing listed under skills, and it was filled out in pencil. I think we are all giving this person too much credit by saying that they were just trying to stand out. I have to laugh because, coincidentally, I recently applied for a job and put teaching myself ukulele via YouTube under hobbies and interests. But it was a hipster millennial outdoor secco kind of company, and it seemed to fit their vibe. I did get an interview, which went really well. Tangentially related, my best friend learned ukulele, so he could tell women at the bar, "I play a little guitar," and never explain it's a ukulele. This 100% would have caught my interest if someone said that to me, but with a follow-up. That's a great sense of humor. It was a gimmick to make you remember them. In that aspect, it worked. Smart move by your manager. Someone close to Satan is probably only applying to a shoe store job to steal all the souls for the Prince of Darkness. Time Person of the Year 2006. I had a HS-aged kid do this in 2014 range. I was unaware of what it was before Googling it. I laughed, appreciated the joke. Job was a seasonal job, conducive to his students. I invited the kid in for an interview. That he no-showed. I was fully prepared to ask about it during the interview. Time Person of the Year 1938. And you want to manage a deli? I appreciate this one. That's funny. Had one guy put, "I'm a sex offender who fucked a child, but I'm working on it" on his resume. I'm an attorney and promptly told her to blacklist that individual for liability purposes. We work in tech with a daycare on site. No shot in hell. Did they seriously, actually, literally write that?
No.
On the plus side, they announce themselves loud and clear so people can stay away. I once got a resume with the worst formatting and grammar. It was clear the person was a non-native English speaker. I don't usually do this, but I recreated her resume, reorganized it, and corrected grammar spelling mistakes, and sent it back to her. I hope she got a job. She wasn't a good fit based on her resume. Otherwise, I would have given her the benefit of the doubt and at least interviewed her. I did this for a helicopter engineer and pilot who had just left the Canadian military for the first time. Her resume was bonkers, just a giant list of every single last thing she had ever done in chronological order, going back nearly 20 years. It was several pages. I cut it down to a one-pager and sent it back, explaining that a network engineer job might not quite translate from fixing and flying helicopters, but I wished her the best. She emailed me back to say my version of her resume made no sense, because it only showed the last 8 years. There's no saving some people. Had a guy put on his resume that he invented the dollar, owned Microsoft and Google and Ford, was an astronaut, and founded New Zealand. This was when I managed an Aldi store, and he was applying as an associate. But he was clear to say on his resume that our business model could be vastly improved with his expertise. I almost brought him in for an interview just for fun, but I couldn't really find the time, along with a real applicant. Life coach and all their education is from sketchy seminars at the Radisson by the airport. That's and hashtag bossbaby, Keo of their makeup man. Had an application for a management position at a public library. Job listing specified that an MLIS, Masters in Library and Information Science. Degree is required. Got an application from one person who was attending community college, earning an associate's degree in music. Their only management experience was running a K-pop fan club. Another person spelled the library's name incorrectly. We had someone apply for the director of the college library I work at. The posting was very clear. You needed a MLIS and at least 5 years of experience. The applicant had a Fiji in ecology and 0 library experience. The quote was, "I don't have a library degree, but I used my university library extensively while in school and feel this qualifies me to be the director. I've eaten at this Michelin-starred restaurant dozens of times and feel this qualifies me as the head chef." Reading through this makes me feel very good about my own resume. I'm sure a lot of us have made mistakes on our CVs. I once changed my email address, but forgot to change. Company.com and the interviewer asked me about it at the end of an interview for a job I did not get. The worst I've seen is from a girl named Claire Fay. What an interesting name. Is it Irish? My colleague showed me the application form handed in alongside the CV where Claire had managed to spell her own name right. I misspelled a word on my resume once, and it was something like qualifications, and it had too many consonants, and I didn't catch it. The interviewer spent half the interview playing guess the misspelling and made it the sole reason I didn't get the job. I even sent him a thank you with an attempt to make light of it, and the asshole didn't let it go. Yea, I find the whole you made a typo, so I can't trust that you won't burn the whole company to the ground attitude pretty stupid. Student at the School of Life. See also, School of Hard Knocks. KUB me business, owner Mel. I had someone who started off on their cover letter with "Let me introduce myself," and I'm very excited to get to know your company. Yet, we'd just fired him a couple of weeks ago from a management position, and he was applying for a different, newly posted job. So I've never trashed a resume, but twice in my career I've had to make the decision to fire someone during their first week. First was for a customer service representative. The job requirements were fairly simple. Good understanding of Excel, prior experience with QuickBooks. This was at a small business, and bilingual Spanish and English. She said, "I'm an expert at Excel. I know everything it can do." First red flag, but I wasn't in the interview where she said that, so I only found out after the fact. Said she had worked with QuickBooks for 5 years at her last job and grew up in a Spanish-speaking household, and it was her first language and learned English in school. Cut to the first week. Any Spanish callers she would put on hold and make up some excuse of how she was in the middle of something and needed one of the other reps to get it. After a couple of days, the other reps realized she couldn't speak Spanish, so they started talking shit about her in Spanish in front of her, and when they would laugh, she would laugh along like she understood the joke. When she did basic onboarding with QuickBooks, our accountant said it was like she's never used any accounting software before, let alone QuickBooks. When I was showing her how to use the Excel spreadsheets that were built to run all of the order entry, she was flabbergasted by a basic formula that multiplied 3 fields together. When I told her there's a VLOOKUP function, she said, "Oh, I didn't know I would need to know programming." Which, by the way, she didn't need to know it. I was just explaining how it worked. Anyway, started on Monday, sent packing Friday morning. Any one of those things we might have kept her and let her grow into the role, but she straight up lied about the only 3 requirements on the posting. Sayonara. The second was much more recent, last year in fact. The private equity firm that owns the corporation I work for owns another company on the East Coast. They were hit with a ransomware attack, and their IT team was completely inept, so the private equity firm contracted our IA team to fly out and help them. One of the things we were going to be doing, aside from remediating the issue, was onboarding their new director, getting them familiar with the existing infrastructure, which we were rebuilding for them, and then making clear the expectations around his role and what the board would be wanting from him. He showed up on his first day at 10:30. We had been there since 7. We talked to him for about 10 minutes, introduced ourselves and talked about which areas of what is now his network we were focusing on, and made it clear we would only be in town for 3 more days before we had to fly back to Lake. We said, feel free to jump in with any of us, and we'll show you what we're doing, why it's important, and how it relates to everything. He proceeded to go to his new office, shut the door, didn't meet anyone else in the company, and set up his email for the rest of the fucking day. Oh, and he left at 3:30. We were there until 7, went to dinner, and then proceeded to continue working until onion. We did that every day we were there. Remember, we're in major crisis mode. The next day he comes in 10:30 again and goes straight to his office, closes the door, and said he needed to finish setting up his email. He had one meeting with the CEO where he only talked about his hobbies and then left for the day at 2:30. On the third day he came in and was fired first thing in the morning. The conversation was something like, "Look, man, you have to run this whole operation. We know it right now because we've been building it for you. You have no idea how to operate and maintain this when we leave, and you wasted 2 of our 4 days here doing a task that takes 3 minutes for a level 1 at tech. Hell, you could have tasked one of your lone techs to do it for you, so you could do, directorship. But you're clearly not the right guy for this role, because the right guy would have been in the trenches with us, helping where possible and learning everything there is to learn." Kind of felt bad about that one. The guy quit another high-paying job to take this one. But man, if you can't put in effort your first week in the job when the entire company is in a crisis mode and you've got contractors on site working 16-hour days. Yeah, fuck off. Attention to detail. Like a lot of companies nowadays, we do blind applications, no mention of age, gender, name, where you studied, etc., allowed on the part that goes to people doing the evaluation. We also attract a lot of applicants from prestigious universities, some of whom really feel the need to find a way to mention the name of the institution in their competency answers, as though it will help more than actually demonstrating that you are a good candidate for the job. Technically, I could throw your application away. I usually won't unless you're especially obnoxious about it, but it definitely does not help. Oh, but one person did add Mensa E to their application in response to a question that had no relation to such information, and that did get rapidly dropped because that's a huge "I'm going to be insufferable to work with" red flag. Edit O and the personal statement that began with "as a large language model" didn't get very far. I once had a resume for an experienced post-college position list one of their accomplishments as perfect attendance from elementary school through high school, certificate available. My only thought was this person would be really annoying. This is the person who gets everyone sick multiple times a year. Stay home. They didn't list a single job. Their only experience was several years of jiu-jitsu. Not a resume, but occasionally someone will cold message me on LinkedIn, and whenever I can, I'll reply if it's a student looking for guidance in my field, and take a call and talk them through some shit they should know. Anyhow, one of those messages began, "Dear Mr. Name, I hope this message finds you in the pink of your health." I'm still not fully over that.